So Dara O'Kearney and I are working on a new project, and we won't spoil what that project is, but we've had a theme come up in the project, which is basically the way all of us were taught poker is wrong. Specifically in the context of how we were taught to think about bets, bluffing, and value bets. We shouldn't be thinking about uh, bets in terms of bluffs and value, Dara. What should we be thinking of them in terms of instead?
Well, the key core principle or concept in poker, as far as I see it, is equity. Equity is what our chance of winning the pot is, and we want the we want our chances of winning the pot to be more than the share of the money that we put into the pot. So, for example, if we go all in and somebody calls, we both put in the same amount of money. If
Mm,
one player wins more than half the time, they have more than 50% of the equity. So they're going to
mm,
win in the long run. Over a sample of one, anything can happen. The player with less equity can win. But if they run it 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, it will eventually come so that the person who has, say, 55% equity wins 55% of the time. So they're profiting by that extra 5%, and the other person is losing 5%. In the same way that when you bet on roulette, you might win in any one spin, but over the long term, you're going to lose whatever the house's edge is, depending on the number of zeros on the wheel. So it's the same in poker. And poker is about recognizing when you have the correct equity to continue. It's also about recognizing when you can force other people to relinquish their equity, because when the dealer deals out the cards, everybody has a chance of winning the hand. Uh, every time they fold, they lose that chance, and that increases the equity of the other players in the hand. And let's say two people see a flop, then they both have a certain chance. Now it won't be 50-50 because one player will have a stronger range, um, and will have position, etc., etc. Maybe a skill edge as well. But if they if they then bet the flop and the player folds, what happens is their equity goes up to 100. They go from, so let's say they had an 80% chance of winning the pot. Um, they bet the other guy folds. Now they've gone from 80 to 100, and the other person's
mm,
equity has gone from 20 down to zero. That's equity denial. And in the long run, the players who realize their own equity the most and deny the most equity to their opponents will win. If every time we play and I have 80% equity, I bet and you fold, then I'm going to win in the long run. On the
So
other
you,
hand, if every time we play and I have 80%, you have 80% equity and you don't bet and you allow me to realize my equity, then I'm going to win 20% of the time. So and let's say half the time I'm 80% and half the time you're 20%. What's going to happen in the long term is every time I'm the favorite with 80%, I'm going to win. But every time you're the favorite, you're not going to bet to force me out of the pot. What if one of us changes our strategy? What if you say start calling when you only have 20% equity? Well, then you will win 20% of the time, but you'll be paying too much for it, so you lose even more. So this is the way you should be thinking about poker, in terms of realizing or preserving your own equity as much as possible and denying it as much as possible to opponents. And if you take something as simple as an opening range, like when it folds around to the button, and everybody has 40 big blinds and there's an ante in play, the solver is saying all these hands in red are the hands that are profitable. What that means is that if you raise to 2.3 big blinds with any of these hands, on average, you will win more than 2.3 big blinds. Um,
right.
so therefore, it outperforms folding. Um, and on the other hand, if you raise a hand in blue, that's not going to make 2.3 big blinds, and that's based on the equity, how often you're going to win the pot, and how well you're going to realize your equity, and how your opponents can deny you equity, etc., etc. So there's always this dance. Now, some hands are a mix. That means effectively that they're break even. You will, on average, get back exactly 2.3 big blinds. So it almost Doesn't matter what you do with those hands. But the hands that are clearly red or clearly blue, there is a clearly preferable option to either raise or to fold. Similarly, when we
So
come, yeah, sorry, go on, Barry.
sorry. I just want to slow down a bit. Equity in this context, as I understand it, means how often we will win the pot if we just checked the hand down to showdown. And therefore, any time we take an aggressive action, we increase our chances, we enhance those chances of winning the pot.
Yeah, equity is not quite if it was checked down, because, for example, you'll see, for example, that we don't play king five off, but we play king two suited.
Mm,
Now, if you run king two suited against a range, it'll probably do worse than king five off in terms of how often it wins. But the
sure.
point is, sometimes it flops. It makes really, really strong hands like flushes. And
Mm,
remember, there's 40 big blinds behind. If our only decision was all in or fold, then yeah, your equity would be equal to how often your hand wins. But with a hand like king two suited, that has more equity in a sense than king five off. Even though king five off, if it was checked down, would win more often because it'll make stronger hands which will win bigger pots than king five off. Sometimes you'll be able to bet as a bluff or as a semi bluff on the flop, and you'll get your opponent to fold equity when you have king
mm,
two suited, and that might not be a good play with king five off. So that's essentially what's going on there.
right. Okay. I and I feel like we should go into a hand to try and demonstrate this
Yeah,
because
yeah. Let's do
this is
that.
one of those. This is definitely one of those things where I feel like I understand this, but I'm not in a position to articulate it well yet. So I think a hand would help me here.
Okay, so let's look at what if the button does raise, the big blind defends everything that's in green. And
Mm,
again, if a hand is in black, like 10-2 off, that means on average, remember the big blind has put in 1.3 big blinds to call now. That means on average that hand is going to make less than 1.3 big blinds. You can see that you can actually hover over any of these hands and it will tell you how much EV the hand has. Now, EV is a more complicated thing than equity. EV is how much it will make in general. So, for example, if we call with 9-3 off, if you look in the bottom right of the screen, you'll see that on average we will lose 0.22 big blinds. So we're putting in 1.3. On average, we're only going to back 1.08. So that's why calling is a bad play. The hand just doesn't have enough equity to call. It's not going to win often enough.
mm,
On the other hand, if we take a hand like 5-3 suited, calling is clearly profitable. It makes 0.54 big blinds.
yeah.
So for the 1.3 we put in, we're going to get back 1.82. You can actually work out how often that means we're going to win the pot. The pot's going to, if we call, the pot's going to be 6.1 big blinds. Uh, we we believe we're going to win 1.8 something. So we're winning the pot roughly 30% of the time. And that's the break even equity. So
Just hover over Queen Free off. I'm just curious about something
yeah.
because that's more of a bluff, isn't it? So, um,
Yeah,
oh,
sometimes
it makes the same as a raise as a bluff as
yeah.
a
This is a general principle in game theory. Anytime a hand mixes two actions, the EV of both actions must be equal.
yeah.
Because if the EV of one of the actions was higher, then you would always want to take the higher EV option. But when it's equal, you can take either one. And then that allows you to sort of mix and match. You can sometimes use it as a bluff. So that, when you raise and they call and the flop comes queen 3-2, you have a very strong hand. But you can also use it as a call. And you can see some hands actually mix calling and folding. And that means calling is actually literally break even. You're
Sure.
making exactly 1.3 big blinds in the long run, for the 1.3 that you're putting in. So again, you can call or fold. And then what the solver does in this case is it just calls often enough that you're not folding too much,
Mhm.
and then folds the rest of the time with those hands. So let's take a specific flop, 9-5-2. And let's imagine we have a specific hand as the button. We have tens. So when this flop comes down 9-5-2 and the big blind presumably checks to you, what are you thinking with tens, Barry?
I'm thinking I've probably got the best hand right now, but there's many turn cards I don't particularly want to see. So I want to overbet, shovel, try and get something like 9x or pocket eights or something like. Well, it's not in a range, but some sort of 9x to call and blast out all the Broadway hands and the ace x hands.
Okay, yeah, that's reasonable. So as you can see, obviously the big blind does have a range check here. I'll just clear the EV to make the screen cleaner. And when it comes to the button, then with tens, we basically always bet. Now we can use different sizes, but the predominant size it's using is fairly large. What we don't want to do is we don't want to checking is going to be lower EV. We can actually look at the EV again. You can see that betting makes us 10.46 big blinds.
Mm.
Now, that might seem strange. You might say, well, wait a minute, the pot's only 6.1 big blinds. How are we making 10.46 big blinds? Well, sometimes our opponent is calling with the worse hand.
Yeah.
And we're winning more money on later streets when we put more money in. When our opponent folds, we make exactly 6.1 big blinds. When they call, we make whatever the pot is currently plus our bet plus their bet multiplied by how often we win the pot. So we're going to win the pot more than half the time. This is why a hand like tens is what, when we were learning poker, we were taught there are value bets and there are bluffs. And a value bet is a hand that you're betting because you're trying to get called by a worse hand and make more money that way. And a bluff is a hand you're betting because you think it's the worst hand and you're trying to get your opponent to fold a better hand. Now, that's an overly simplistic way of thinking about it. Actually, what you're trying to do in all cases is increase your equity. If you bet a hand like pocket tens, if your opponent folds, that's actually to your benefit. It's better than checking because if you checked, your opponent still had some chance to win the pot. But if you bet and they fold, they've gone from whatever chance they had, say it was only 10% down to zero. Nevertheless, you benefited from that. The pot 6.1, and you've gone from winning it 90% of the time to winning it 100% of the time. So even when you have the best hand, there's equity denial. That's why equity denial is a better concept than protection. Similarly, if you take a bluff, say you decide to bluff with Jack 3 suited and your opponent folds, well, they probably were going to win the pot actually more than half the time, with a lot of the hands they fold. So that's an even bigger result for you. And that's why we choose very weak hands as our bluffs. If we use a sort of a mediocre hand as our bluff, that's say going to win 40-50% of the time, and our opponent folds, well, that's nice. We've gone from say 40% up to 100%. But if we choose a hand that only had a 10% chance to win at showdown and our opponent folds, that's a much bigger win. So it's all about manipulating the equity.
So just make the solver do the bet the same the big bet with the tens
Yeah.
and jack three does, and then let's look at a hand that folds. Okay, so ace eight suited.
Yeah.
That's a good hand. Jack three is very happy to make that hand fold. Pocket tens was nicely ahead of that hand, but also pretty happy that when they're not going to have to see an ace on the turn. So can you dumb this down for me and explain this in the context of how we have over realized equity with the two hands that we just played, the tens and the jack three, and then frame it in comparison to bluffs and value.
Yeah. So if we had checked the tens, what happens is our opponent gets to see the turn card. Now, it might be an ace and it might make them the better hand. Or they might have to pick up a flush draw or a gut shot if a 7, a 6, a 4, or a 3 rolls off.
Yeah.
They might pick up a pair if an 8 rolls off, and then they might make 2 pair on the river. So if we
it could have come like a king with a scare card to bluff it.
exactly, well, let's say we just decide on the flop. Oh, I'm not sure. I don't want to bet. I'm going to just try and check it down. And even if our opponent allows us to do that, there's lots of ways they can get there. They can hit their ace. They can hit a backdoor flush. They can hit a backdoor straight. They can hit running eights. So we benefited. We basically gone from whatever chance we had of winning the pot. And actually, let's use an equity calculator. We're going to lose the pot just over 20% of the time. So even though when we bet our tens, we were kind of hoping he'd call with the worst hand,
Hmm.
uh, we've still benefited. We've gone from winning the pot just under 80% of the time to winning it 100% of the time. If we win the pot 80% of the time, what's our EV? 80% of 6.1 is just over 4.8.
Hmm.
So we've gone from 4.8 to 6. So we've gained 1.2 big blinds with our bet. Um, on the other hand, if we get called by a worse hand, we've made the pot bigger and we're still going to win it more often. Let's say he calls with something like Jack 9 suited. Well, he's going to win the pot 20 less than 25% of the time, and we've made him put in more money.
Yeah.
So we made him put him in the same amount of extra money as we do, but we're going to win that money more often. So
So, can I just try and frame this in normie terms? So, um, in the first example where he folds, we win 100% of 6.1 big blinds.
yeah,
Um, in the second example where they call, we win 75.35% of what was the
the
bet?
pot's going to
Seven.
be there's going to be another 15 big blinds in the pot, so there's going to be
So we
21
win
big
70.
blinds.
Yeah. So we win 75% of 21 big blinds.
Yeah,
Which is still greater than this 100% of six big blinds that we won by taking the pot down.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and if so, and then just, but if we checked with pocket tens, we we only win 75% of 6.1 big blinds, assuming that the turn is action is similar.
Uh, Against Jack 9 of hearts, you mean?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
In the
yeah, like it depended on the yeah. So yeah, yeah. If we check, whether we check or bet, if they call, we're only going to win at the same amount of the time. But we made the pot bigger,
yeah.
um, for when we win it. So our equity, if we check it down, our equity is 75% to 6.1. If our
Just for complete.
if we bet and they call, our equity is 75% of 21, which is more than 15 big blinds. Now we have to put in 7.6 big blinds to increase our equity to 15.1, but clearly that's a profitable bet for us. By putting nothing in, we have 4.8 big blinds in equity. By putting in this extra 7.6 big blinds, we increase our equity by more than 10 big blinds. So we're clearly showing a profit on our bet.
Just for completeness, I just want to see what the Jack three suited against ace eight suited bluff
Yeah.
would have
Okay.
been.
So let's give ourselves Jack 3 suited. So the quickest way to do this is change this, I guess. Uh, and you can see we actually have less than 27% equity. So if we checked it down, we're going to win less than 27% of the time. But when we bet and they fold, we win 100%. So that's a really big win for us.
And is it correct to actually frame it in these terms? We have just won 73.33% equity
Correct.
with our bluff. We've won this
Correct.
extra equity.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Is there a situation where checking is the best way to realize equity? I mean, I guess it is when we've got a cap range and we don't want someone to overfold their equity.
Yeah, this comes up quite a lot, particularly when you're in position.
Sorry, just
Yeah.
I don't want people to go down the wrong road that I certainly could go down, which is it's correct to bet 100% of the time with everything. Which
Yeah, no, 100%. Because like if you think about it, you have to be doing better than checking for a bet to be profitable. Now,
yeah,
betting tens is clearly profitable. When we know the guy has ace suited, we're fudging the issue slightly here because we're thinking about specific hands, whereas in actual fact, you have to be profitable against the entire range for something to be bet. But it's easy enough to see that something like tens is clearly profitable to bet because there are all these hands that are worse than our hand that can call, not just Jack 9, but Queen 9, King 9, Ace 9, etc., etc. And yet we also benefit when, say, a one overcard hand folds. But if we go back to looking at the strategy of the big blind, sorry, the button, there are some like ace seven suited is not as clear cut a bet. Um, because when Jack nine calls us, all we've done is we've made the pot bigger with a worse hand.
Yeah.
Um,
But we're ahead of all the trash.
we're ahead of all the other trash. Now, sometimes when you're in position as well, you don't want to bet and open yourself up to the possibility of being check raised. If you have in those spots, if you have a very weak hand that you don't mind folding to a check raise, that's fine. Obviously, you can bet trying to win the pot, and if you get check raised, well, you found out two things. First of all, you don't your opponent definitely knows he has a better hand and he's not going to give up. So you can just bow out. But betting a hand like say ace seven suited with a backdoor flush draw in this spot, it would really suck to get check raised with that hand.
Yeah.
If,
And then Dara, with a hand like pocket fours near the bottom, we if we bet, we're just going to fold out all the hands that we beat. And there's
well, that's largely true. It's not completely true. Like, we can still get ace eight. Let's look at what call. Well, fours will never use the big size. You can see.
Yeah.
Anytime it bets, it just uses a small size because using the big size wouldn't make any sense. Exactly what you say is true. It's not going to fold out better hands like a nine. Maybe it'll fold a five once in a blue moon. I'm not sure what actually folds to the big bet. Let's have a look. Yeah, you sometimes get a five to fold, but for the most part, when you bet, if you did big a bet size with say pocket fours, you're not getting the nines to fold. You're very occasionally getting a five to fold. You're occasionally getting called by worse as well by a two, but even those hands have equity as well. And then everything that's folding is just pretty much hands that were behind. Now you still do benefit somewhat from denying equity to those hands,
Yeah.
but that's a situation where checking kind of outperforms betting.
So to summarize, and I think we're going to make some more videos on this topic. They're all going to be completely for free on the YouTube channel. So if anyone has any questions, stick them in the comments. But thinking in terms of bluffs and value is too binary. And just starting to think in terms of equity realization and equity denial is a more holistic way of thinking about things.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can boil it down almost to a golden rule that there are only ever two good reasons to bet. Reason number one is to win the pot right now.
Right.
And when that happens, your pot share increases from whatever it was up to 100. And even if you were almost certainly going to win the pot, even if you were a 90% favorite, you still benefit. You get that extra 10% when they fold.
Yeah, there are value hands that certainly subscribe to this as well as bluffs, obviously.
Yeah, so reason number one is to win the pot right now, and reason number two is to make the pot bigger, in a situation where you're going to win the pot more than half the time. And that's the case, say, when you bet tens and they call with Jack nine. You're going to win the pot 75% of the time, and you've made the pot bigger.
And likewise, there are bluffs that also benefit from this. Bluffs that will turn something good on.
Yeah, even bluffs obviously benefit more from the side of when they fold. We move from 26-27% equity to winning the pot 100% of the time. But we have 26% or 27% equity. We are going to get there 26 or 27% of the time. And when we do get there, we're going to win a bigger pot. So while that's not the reason we're betting, we do benefit from the pot being bigger when we win there. It's not a total write-off. It's not like, oh, we got called, we can never win now. That's only ever true on the river. We always have equity earlier in the hand. And we benefit there for making the pot bigger for when we win it.
So, as I said, we are going to make more content on this. This might be quite jarring for people to listen to. It certainly is for me. Like the way that we've been learning has not been optimal for the majority of players. I guess I'll sign off by saying I look forward to misapplying this at the tables.
Yeah, like a golfer changing his swing. Yeah, we can expect some incredible hacks in Barry's near future in the Fofty or whatever he plays on Unibet.
Absolutely.
For more free content like this, including some free courses, free videos, and a free ebook on how to study, go to simplifiedpoker.com/free.